Tulsi Gabbard is a former Democrat presidential candidate and congresswoman. So does this make you angry when you just see these two different standards of justice?
You know, what makes me angry, Jesse, is just how dangerous the consequences of this are. Because what you're really pointing out here in all of these different examples that you're talking about is how our law enforcement is essentially being politicized and weaponized to go after political opponents, as well as to go after people who refuse to comply, people who, won't go along with whatever they're saying we, the people, must do. You mentioned a few examples. You mentioned parents who are standing up for their kids. The past, how we've seen the IRS go after organizations with the word patriot in their title of their organization. This not only dangerously undermines our democracy, the rule of law, but it also really points to how those in power are very short-sighted, not really realizing, like, hey, at some point, power is going to shift to the other side. But even those who do realize, like, we need to do all that we can to prevent that from happening and defy what is right and wrong and feel like the end justifies the means. And I think that's what we see in dictatorships. That's what we see in banana republics. And that's what we need to prevent from happening. That's why we have the Constitution. Constitution provides us with the pathway to make sure that we don't have people who are abusing their power to maintain their power. But we need to take a stand to make sure that we don't get to that point that becomes irreversible.
Do you think the Democrats actually believe that if Republicans take power, they will turn the FBI, the Justice Department, the CIA, local DAs against their political enemies? I don't even think the Democrats think the Republicans have it in them to do that. And I don't think the Republicans think they should be doing that because they think that's a massive overreach. So how do we correct what's going on, which is only happening, this abuse of power, on the left? We can't just, we're going to do it to them, right? Or should we?
Of course not. Absolutely not. We need to stay within the bounds of the Constitution and the rule of law. I think the thing that I frankly have heard from some Democrats is an even more dangerous thing than that fear that you're talking about, which is they feel like that they need to do whatever they need to do in order to save America. And that is a dangerous mindset to have. You know, and you look throughout history, just about every single dictator who does whatever they feel they need to do, they feel like their cause is just. And so when we have people in positions of power, yes, in government, but in other sectors of our community, our society as well, who feel like they need to do all they can to save the country, to save the people, and yet they're defying our Constitution and undermining our democracy and ruining our country in the process. This is what we need to protect ourselves and our country and our future from.
Well, they don't need to save the country because I saved the world. And if they'd read the book, they would have known that and they'd leave it alone. Gabby, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.